All right, we have another video here we're going to be doing. My wife has been doing some research, and what this is going to be proving is the fifth kingdom. The fifth kingdom is miry clay and iron. The two are mixed, and they don't mix very well, according to the book of Daniel. The iron, of course, is the Roman Catholic system, and the miry clay, very clearly from Scripture, look up miry clay in the King James Bible. The only other reference to it is a reference to the nation of Israel, the mingled seed of Israel. And in the Old Testament, you see that the Jews were mingling a lot with the descendants of Ham. And then in the New Testament, they start to mingle with the descendants of Japheth. Because there are prophecies that God has given to Noah and his three sons. And one of them is, the oldest son is Japheth. And the Bible teaches that God shall enlarge Japheth. So the Jews, if they want to get into making lots of money to bring in their own kingdom without Jesus Christ, then they need to have a lot of stuff going on with the financial world. All right? That's what you have to understand here. She's going to be showing you the proof of how they do this thing and how it's all about money. That's what the thing is. And that's why 1 Timothy chapter 6:10 says, for the love of money is the root of all evil. Okay? It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. All right? Not money itself. A lot of people lie about the King James Bible. They say, oh, it says money is the root of all evil. No, it doesn't. The love of money is the root of all evil. All right? So with that little introduction, go ahead. You can take over here the mouse and go ahead.
This article is by Brookings Institution. And 50 years after 1967, the U.S. and occupation by another name. It talks about what is called the West Bank and how it encompasses Judea and Samaria. And also that it's a military permanent occupation in terms of West Bank and East Jerusalem boundaries. Then it goes on to talk about how the territories conquered by the Emsos devils in Israel include the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And this whole thing about peace and normalization with the Arab states, that actually defies Genesis chapter 16 verses 11 and 12 in the King James Bible. Then it also describes how denying Palestinians citizenship and other basic rights is involved with this whole thing. But I have to wonder, are Palestinians 100% unmingled Jews? Or 100% unmingled whatever? Which they never say anything about in this article. Rather strange.
In different times I've actually dealt with people professing themselves to be Jews, including rabbis, and I'll just plainly ask them, what tribe are you from? They never answer. I've never had one of these people, the Israeli type of people, answer that question. Now, I believe that there are true Jews somewhere, but when I see the pictures of these people from Israel or the Jews, just anybody calling themselves a Jew, I mean, it's ridiculous. I just look at these people and I think there's just no way that this is a distinct racial, ethnic group of people. They're not. And I mean, anybody can basically come in and say, hey, I'm a Jew or whatever, and I get the promises and I can go and I can get into the financial thing and all the stuff that they do. And that's the big problem here. I have no problem in the world. We have no problem in the world with people that are actual, true ethnic Jews and being there in the land and receiving that land. That's not a problem. And the Bible said that they would come back in the end times, and they come back in unbelief. All right, Ezekiel chapter 36, I've done whole studies on it, and there's multiple other places in Isaiah and Jeremiah as well that talk about this thing, that they're dispersed in all the different nations, and then God brings them back. That is Bible prophecy. That has not happened before Jesus Christ showed up on the earth or some kind of foolish nonsense that replacement theology teaches. All right, but what you have to understand is anybody can get in here and make the actual real Jews look bad. And so it's pretty interesting. But go ahead.
And a few more points about this article. It refers to a two-state solution and creeping apartheid. Well, I imagine apartheid would refer to kindred purity because of the Nelson Mandela situation from Africa years ago. And this whole thing about Palestinian rights. Well, I have to wonder which MSOS or Roman banker created the term Palestinian. Again, they don't talk about that particular answer. And then they talk about democratic Israel and how MSOS and Arabs have equal rights. Well, democracy is a terrible thing because I believe it's an MSOS creation.
No, it's rule by majority opinion, not rule of law. That's why democracy is always bad. It always ends up very badly.
Mm-hmm. And it ends with this statement of a more peaceful future. Goes on with other words, but for all faiths and all beliefs. And I have to wonder if that's a reference to Noahide laws as a disguised type of a reading between the lines reference with this whole situation.
Could be.
The next article is Israel has sold record amount of debt in U.S. since war on Gaza erupted. Israel bonds target local governments and retail investors. Retail means banking, essentially, by another form, in the U.S. with a low starting product at $36. And this particular article talks about how the government of Israel's U.S.-based bond broker, Israel Bonds, says it has sold $5 billion worth of debt in the last 20 months, and how this bond issuance is actually 2 times greater than the amount of Israel bonds they discuss being sold in this article.
Mm-hmm. And just to make something very plain here, because this is very important, if you don't understand some of the financial stuff going on here, it's difficult for me as well, but understand what they mean by Israel has sold record amount of debt. What does that mean? How can you sell debt? Very simple. Whenever you go into debt, you're signing your name to a document saying, I'm going to repay this, be it a auto loan or student loan, mortgage, whatever. And so what they're selling is you. You become a slave. The borrower is servant to the lender. All right. And so that usury thing where they're allowing you to go into debt and then you have to pay back more than you borrowed through interest payments, that's what they mean by they're selling debt. They're selling you if you're in debt. Mm-hmm. And you see this thing, who holds your loan or your mortgage or whatever, it'll shift and it'll change. Oh, now we're going to be going with this banking system or this investment firm or whatever. They just purchased your debt. Yeah, they're selling you. Mm-hmm. So it is financial slavery is what it is.
You are a surety for a stranger.
Mm-hmm. Like the Bible talks about.
And so it continues on by saying Israel Bonds is affiliated with Israel's finance ministry and sells bonds, I should say, inside of the U.S. to both retail and institutional investors. And then they talk about this 5-year Israeli bonds yield being 4.8 to 5.44% interest rate. Well, that's ironically similar to a store card that you can sign up for at a store, which I highly discourage. I have to wonder if it's a derivative of this whole situation under the guise of a store card that you sign up for discounts. And then they discuss how Israel's financing needs is actually interconnected with the military fundings needs of Israel. Well, ironically, ancient Rome, back in the day, before it fell, had problems financing and funding its military because it was beginning to go out of the bounds of its habitation. Mm-hmm. And when you go out of the bounds of your habitation, you are guaranteed problems.
Yeah.
And it's no different here. Mm-hmm. And so they talk about the ratio of government's overall lending to the international debt sales and Israel bonds U.S. sales, and how it's connected to state and county level buyers in New York, Texas, Ohio, Illinois, probably other states too, but your municipal taxes and the state and county level of financing, or rather taxes for everything, is tied in with this whole war bonds effort. And it goes on to talk about the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant out for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, not his real name, and ex-defense minister Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes, as I say. Well, and how public opinion on Israel has turned sharply negative from France to Japan. So all around the world, public opinion is souring against the MSOS devils of Israel. And it also tells you another investor in this whole thing in Palm Beach County, Florida. So again, county government investing in this whole situation. And lastly, it talks about the demand for Israel's debt in international bonds being $8 billion. I wonder why the national debt of the U.S. keeps increasing.
No, because see, he just came out recently and said that it's going to be going down now. The economy's never been better, inflation is near zero, and it's going to be going down. So you can trust Trump. He's a good guy. Yeah.
He's perfect.
Yeah.
Next article, or link I should say. This is from the U.S. Treasury Sadaha, by a different name, website. Sadaha is the Hebrew word for Treasury Department for my studies with what the Lord has shown me. And here in the notes, it's collected primarily from U.S.-based custodians and broker-dealers. Since U.S. securities, mortgages are a security by a different term, MBS, held in overseas custody accounts may not be attributed to the actual owners. And they say how it's not exactly precise because of this information. Well, there's something weird and occultic, I'm sure, with that whole thing. But if you read the notes and you look at the list of countries, Japan has the largest amount of treasury securities. And as we'll see further on in the study, Japan has the highest level of external debt. So you can see how this whole thing starts to link together.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that Japan just got their first female prime minister, who is actually from New York City, that is nothing.
No.
There's no connection.
That's conspiratorial.
Oh yeah.
So the next link is Israel Bonds, their actual website. And what you need to look for is at the bottom of the landing page here. Go past their stupid marketing banners and terminology. International affiliates. This site is for Development Corporation for Israel, which sells Israel bonds in the United States, as we've already talked about in the previous articles. For Canadian purchasers, it's called Canada Israel Securities Limited. And for purchasers outside of the U.S. and Canada, it's called Development Company for Israel International Limited and Development Company for Israel Europe GmbH in Germany.
Mm-hmm. So again, this is proving what I've been saying. Okay, the synagogue of Satan, they say that they are Jews and they're not. All right, this is so incredibly important because this modern state that people hate, oh, Israel's no more, we hate Israel, look at all the bad things that they're doing. What you're doing is you're being deceived, because modern Israel is an investment situation. That's why all these people are becoming quote unquote Jews. They're not even really Jews. Mm-hmm. That's why when you ask them, what tribe are you from? What tribe are you a part of? Can you trace your ancestry back to the tribe of Benjamin or Issachar or any of them? Well, let's change the subject. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Israel is an investment company right now. And that doesn't mean that, oh, then there are no real Jews. No, that doesn't mean that. The real Jews are out there. All right? And as God's people, you should be praying for them. As pertaining to the gospel, they're enemies. But as touching the election, they are beloved for their father's sakes. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. If they're descended from that bloodline, then you as a Christian have a responsibility to say, I support them. All right? Not financially, whatever else, but you pray for them, and you want to see God's, that the Lord is going to bless those people. All right, but that doesn't mean that all of Israel is, they're not all Jewish. Okay, it's an investment company. So that's the challenging part here. God is not done with Israel as a nation, as a people. And what the whole time of Jacob's trouble is about, it's not about the purification of the church. That is so stupid. It is about this whole mess being worked out, where the Lord goes in and says, you're not a Jew, you're not a Jew, you're not a Jew. He separates the wheat from the tares. You remember that? Yeah, that's what it's about. Go ahead and continue.
So please remember, before leaving this page, Israel Bonds is a U.S.-based entity. I would lean towards New York City, of course, because that's the mother of all satanic finance stuff in the U.S. Here we have a video explaining what bonds are and how they're defined.
Mm-hmm.
And what you need to remember from this video is the simple fact that bonds are loans. Get a hold of that. Given to a company or government by an investor. So basically, the government is using your taxpayer dollars to repurpose as a loan in the guise of a bond for this whole industrialization infrastructure building. And they talk about that. By issuing a bond, a company or government borrows money from investors who are paid interest on money they loaned to the government. And bonds are frequently issued to fund new projects, such as stadiums, stadiums, infrastructure, building roads, building bridges, building entertainment outlets, or ongoing expenses in the form of social programs and other things, public education. So your tax dollars being so high, it all ties into this whole thing of what is a bond. And Schwab explains pretty well what a bond is and why this is so important to understand to the study. Here we have the U.S. Congress website talking about this whole thing of U.S. foreign aid to Israel. Overview and development since October 7th, 2023. The start of this Gaza war, so to speak. And how Israel is the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. foreign assistance since World War II. You can read it either on this page or go to the PDF version.
And understand, again, foreign assistance. We're giving U.S. aid and whatever else. No, you're investing. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what this whole, again, understand the point here of this video. It's investment. It's not, oh, they need help. We need to, no, they're looking to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the PDF version is right here as of May 28th of 2025. But they talk about the security aspect, the shared strategic goals, the historical ties, and how their funding program is in current dollars, meaning non-inflation adjusted dollars. So why is the COLA, cost of living adjustment, not being adjusted properly or at all? And why are your tax bills increasing all the time for property and other things? And why is your cost of living increasing all the time? Because of this very problem. U.S. foreign aid to Israel in non-inflation adjusted dollars.
Mm-hmm. In other words, the money that they should be saving and not spending, our government is gambling with, stock market, buying bonds and things like that to, invest into Israel.
Mm-hmm. And they
don't invest in the American people, they invest in another country.
Right, and they call it bilateral assistance or bilateral agreements, which mm-hmm. simply means non-guaranteed debt to U.S. government agencies. And they will talk about that in this article on page 14. But they're very explicit on how this whole scam of a system works, if you read it for yourself. I would recommend printing out the PDF and pencil and paper reading, but it's your option. This is Slate's article on what are Israel's loan guarantees and how reducing Israel's loan guarantees account for any money the country spends constructing a security perimeter. I wonder if that's tied in with the Berlin Wall concept from years ago.
Probably.
We're just talking about dividing the Israel citizens from Palestinians, but who is defined as a Palestinian? And so they talk about how loan guarantees are basically you are supposedly not able to pay off the loan, so you get a how do they describe it? Well, it applies to financed vehicles, apartment rentals, Soviet immigration housing materials, according to their own words in the article. But you promise to pay off your loan balance. But if you're not able to pay off the loan balance completely, then you have somebody co-sign, essentially, with you for the loan. Whether it's a friend, a relative, the U.S. government, on down the line. And they talk about how the U.S. Federal Reserve guaranteed loans in accordance with the U.S. government's good credit. That's suspicious because the U.S. government has a history, I would say a very long-standing history, of defaulting on its debt. Because every time they have to raise the debt limit, it's because they have already defaulted on the debt limit and the debt payment system. So the U.S. is a very subprime borrower of its debt. But they say how U.S. Federal Reserve guaranteed loans offer lower interest rates compared to obtaining a loan without a backer. And they tie it in with this special post-Gulf War II aid package, plus $3 billion in other assistance from the U.S. annually, again, increasing the national debt of this country, increasing your debt burden, your cost of living burden, and how this new round of guarantees, meaning loan guarantees, partially helps Israel to pay off its original debt. But they don't say what the original debt amount is from Israel. And so this whole debt situation, loan guarantee, ties in with this situation of creating new settlements in Israel and the contested territory of Israel. And so this whole thing about $9 billion plus interest is the actual cost of this whole loan scam situation with Israel needing U.S.-backed loans to keep its debt payments under control. But that's part of the financial desperation game, as they call it, because it is a game to see how much debt can be, created in order to make someone, or rather a country, financially desperate. And they use this in order to push leaders to attend a peace conference, and then they also tie in the thing of suspending settlement construction for this whole thing. So it's a very complicated matter, but you can see how it ties in with why the average person is struggling so much with their bills. The next link is Times of Israel. Israel's 1,400 Chabad rabbis skipped New York reunion in favor of the war effort. And some 6,500 participants attend Haredi movement's flagship annual event where Israel and its wartime victims loom large. This whole event is held in the Brooklyn borough of New York City. See how everything ties back to New York City, the mother commune of MSOS devils in this country? And they talk about how these rabbis, pictured here, live in Israel, according to statistics from 2023, the beginning of the Gaza war, and how this annual gathering of Chabad envoys from around the world takes place in New York City. And how they consider this whole situation as a great hour of need, but it's really a gathering of the world's rabbis. It's a rabbinical reunion.
And remember that Jesus Christ put an end to the rabbi system. He said, call no man on earth rabbi. So what they're doing, again, it's a rebellion against God. And we're going to put off our meeting because there's we have to talk about the war thing. Yeah, because it's a big investment time. You can make a lot of money during war. And that's what these guys are all about. Because they need money to build their kingdom. Mm-hmm. That's the whole thing. But continue.
And it continues to talk about the different locations of this celebration. Namely, Jerusalem's Western Wall. Could this be why they go to the Wailing Wall with their prayers? And how the IDF commanders furloughed these Chabad rabbis who are serving as reservists in this Gaza war. And also how these rabbis focus on helping other reservists who aren't rabbis, supposedly. No idea what the ratio is of rabbis serving as reservists versus regular reservists. And fighting against the Palestinian terrorists on Ashdod in order to topple Hamas. So you can read through this yourself, but this is a big factor in this whole situation of funding the Gaza war with bonds. This is their group of mobilized soldiers, essentially. Here you have the South African Jewish Report. And they talk about the secret of Chabad. And how the secret depends on generational perpetuity. And how they have a business model. So this whole Chabad movement is an intellectual business. In South Africa, it's more structured, whereas in America, or the US, it's more open, so to speak, centered around certain urban centers, and one of them, I would imagine, is New York City, of course, the mother of all this MSOS devilment, because the US is more liberal in this whole movement structure. And they discuss in this article how their emissaries are simply couples of rabbis and rebbetzins proselytizing Judaism and Chassidut via leadership and infrastructure for MSOS and Genos, Jews in name only, who are in danger of assimilation, which is rather funny, because that's their whole purpose, to assimilate all other cultures and peoples and nations and tongues into this homogenized melting pot.
Yeah, and they don't look Shemitic at all to me.
No.
I mean, look at the picture there. I mean, yeah, okay. I mean, they do not look like a distinct ethnic group of people, which is why they're called the mingled synagogue of Satan in Scripture. Mm-hmm. But continue.
And last but not least, the article discusses a post-yeshiva military service for Chabad boys. So you can see why we call them soldiers for this whole war funding operation. And how most of their communities are not Orthodox observant, even though they consider themselves an Orthodox movement. And it goes on to talk about congregations of communities. Don't church buildings call themselves congregations and congregants?
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a connection with this whole MSOS system and church building congregations.
No, because churches don't go into debt to have their buildings.
No.
So they avoid debt.
They're debt-free.
You go to every church building out there, they preach hard against debt. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Actually, they don't, but, yeah. Continue.
The next article is how Chabad became the heart of Jewish life on campus. Chabad on campus empowers Jewish students, or rather MSOS, to be proud in the face of anti-Semitism.
Pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow they missed that verse of Scripture, I guess, even though it's in the Old Testament.
They're so smart, yet they miss such a simple verse. And they describe in detail how these rabbis in the Chabad movement are using psychological operations tactics in order to bring people into their fold and militarize their people into action in supporting this whole cause of war bonds, funding the Gaza war operation. And how coexistence basically fuels the MSOS behavior. They love the concept and idea of coexistence because it furthers their agenda. The next article is Chabad across Israel mobilizes thousands of emissaries aid millions of Jews. 4 divisions of massive nationwide program address wartime needs. And here they show a rabbi, supposedly, of Chabad hugging another soldier. And
Because I think the rabbi is this guy here.
Or maybe
that's the soldier there.
Okay, well, the rabbis serve as soldiers, so you never know. But they talk about the unprecedented slaughter of their synagogues, celebrating Simchat Torah. So basically, they're celebrating the Talmud and implementing the Talmud in their synagogues. And yet, they also discuss over 1,100 Chabad Lubavitch emissaries who are based in almost 300 cities, towns, and villages. I have to wonder how many of these casualties they talk about were mingled Jews, not even Jews, just mingled people of whatever sort. And how their vast network of Chabad contacts is starting their collective crisis mode. So you can read more about this yourself. Here we have a blog talking about the Torah, Talmud essentially, Israel, and the nations.
No. Torah's not the Talmud. Torah is the first 5 books of Moses.
Right, but according to these...
But what you're saying is, when they teach, they have a Torah center, they're actually just teaching the Talmud there.
Right.
Okay. But keep it going.
Because if you scroll down to this particular comment, you have a rabbi giving his thoughts on this whole situation. And he ties in all this stuff with the Torah, or rather Talmud, in these rabbis' own opinion.
Right there, Gentile non-believers' Noahide laws are the only measure they are held to.
Mm-hmm.
I reject your stupid Noahide laws, and we will never submit to them because it would turn... If you understand what the Noahide thing is, one of the things is idolatry, and they consider that Jesus is an idol, a false idol. So they will cut your head off if you believe that Jesus is God.
Mm-hmm.
Go to hell and burn. All right. It's just that simple. But we need to continue here. We have to get this done.
All right. Just real quick. These Gentiles would keep kosher, keep Shabbat. Wasn't Charlie Kirk essentially celebrating the Shabbat with his, junk drawer and saying something in
He'd put his phone in for the Sabbath day or whatever else so that he couldn't be contacted and things, and he'd say Shabbat Shalom or some kind of thing. Christians do not have to submit to anything Jewish. If there's in Christ there's neither Jew nor Gentile. And when you go to the council in Acts chapter 15, they never mention Noahide laws or anything else like that. So you don't have to act like you're Jewish or something if you're a Christian. That's false teaching. Actually, it's condemned in the book of Galatians, trying to get brought back under the law. But continue. I have to wonder
if Charlie Kirk is a closet Noahide before he died. And so you have a list of Messianic and Hebrew Christian congregations. What an oxymoron. There's no such thing as Hebrew Christian unless you're an unmingled Jew who actually comes to God, to the Lord Jesus Christ for salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we scroll down here to Georgia, the location of Rabbi Moreno Briers in Atlanta. So you can go through that list and figure out any rabbis you hear about in your area and see where they're located and how they coin their church or synagogue institution. This is Rabbi Moreno Breyer's YouTube channel.
Or YouTube account.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've seen him in my comments section. So whatever. But continue here.
Then we have this article from Crystal Capital Partners talking about the U.S. debt. And they compare the news cycle on the U.S. debt clock website as being a carnival ticketing center. And they go on in this article to talk about the debt ceiling and how much can be borrowed to fund their obligations, including Social Security, healthcare, defense. They talk about pension funds tying into this whole situation, because pension funds are a corporate liability until the pension fund is given to the person who is eligible for it. Then it's counted as an asset. But until it's obligated or funded, then it's a liability. And they tie in the interest payments to the debt service and defense spending and all this. So you can read through it yourself. Here we have 7 underwriters of war bonds, instrumental in enabling Israel's assault on Gaza. And they actually list the 7 underwriters. They are all banks. And so this is the insurance policy of this whole war operation in Gaza for these MSOS devils.
Mm-hmm. And a very simple lesson of history, which I've talked about in previous videos. Who wins every war? The banks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
so, but continue.
This ties in sovereign debt being added to the overall state budget and bonds covering the Gaza war costs through the Israel bonds entity. So you can read this yourself. Here you have the Financial Stability Board's list of global systemically important banks, GSIBs for short. Again, I would recommend printing out the PDF file and reading it by hand yourself. And this ties in with the whole insurance policy side of this whole situation. Then you have the Federal Reserve Board, meaning the New York office of the Federal Reserve. And this is printed from Washington, D.C., but this is how banks manage the composition of their high-quality liquid assets. And they discuss how their reserve balances and excess reserve balances at the Federal Reserve, the Fed as they call themselves, tie in with the Treasury securities holdings and mortgage-backed securities, known as MBS, and how it's all part of the high-quality liquidity and the interest rate risk, meaning marine insurance, in order to minimize, manage, and mitigate insurance risk. That's the whole purpose of this financial stuff. And what they consider to be cash-like or cash-based assets. Another version of it from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, more updated version, but here's the PDF of it from the St. Louis branch. And then here you have the U.S. Treasury Department's presentation to TBAC, also known as the Office of Debt Management. So every time they talk about assets, they're actually saying debt, because that's how they talk. And here, there's a lot of different things to look at, but they go into the technical details of U.S. Treasuries, MBSs, and all the other stuff, and how housing finance is also tied in with this. This is why it is vital for you to not get into debt. And if you are in debt, get out of debt as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to refresh this. All right. I have no idea why this is doing this, but rabbis urge homeowners or mortgage bankers to help homeowners. this is really weird. Why it's doing this.
It's just timed out or something, but go to the next article.
Here you have the BIS, Bank for International Settlements. Their report on Basel III, the liquidity coverage ratio and liquidity risk monitoring tools. Again, this is the whole foundation for their markets, liquidity and velocity of currency. Notice the name of the entity, Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. These are the same people, the central bank for central banks, as they call themselves, who force the winner of a war or military operation to pay off the debt of the loser or losers in the war. So you can read up on liquidity in this report. Here you have a Times of Israel article discussing how President Trump picks a Miami-based rabbi and businessman as the U.S. envoy for combating anti-Semitism. U.S. President says Chabad-linked Yehuda Kaplan, who was a fundraiser and campaign surrogate for him, will be the strongest representative for Americans and Jews across the globe. So you have a Chabad rabbi funding Chump. So this proves that Chump is not wealthy or rich. He's just a paid actor who's funded by a Chabad Lubavitch rabbi, Emsos devil. Chump doesn't have true wealth. And he's, of course, from New York City. A liberal city boy. Trying to destroy people through debt and war bonds and financing. This whole conflict. Or rather, the Emsos conflict against unmingled people.
People just seem to forget the fact that he spent over $8 trillion in his first presidency. But we need to continue here.
Then you have the JNS article called A Vision for Jerusalem During Trump's Next Term, and how the incoming administration can take to solidify previous advances and promote security in the region, as the U.S. Congress report talked about earlier in the study. And notice the Make Israel Great Again logo. I wonder which came first, Make Israel Great or Make America Great Again? They're so similar, don't you think?
Continue.
Nothing to it. Then you have a Times of Israel report called The Danger of a Peace Illusion with Syria. A terrorist now wearing business suits, doing deals with the Turkish president, right here, Erdogan. And here's al-Sharah at the presidential palace in Ankara, Turkey.
Jelani. He had to change his name to al-Sharah or whatever else because he doesn't want to be connected with his own past of being a terrorist and murdering people.
But yet he's a CIA asset. CIA jackals are EHM level 2, meaning economic hitman. This whole financial system is truly an economic hit to a nation's economy. And you can read this article for yourself and see how they mention this whole situation. And then you have Yeshiva World News. Syrian president, or rather de facto puppet president, al-Sharah, is playing basketball with U.S. military officials from CENTCOM and other U.S. Army commands. Central Command Chief Admiral Brad Cooper is playing basketball with this guy, a terrorist. From a few days ago, reported on. Then you have on Facebook the Jewish Insider's post discussing this, and here's their summary. Brian Mast with terrorist al-Sharah, who was in Washington for a meeting with President Trump, and also talking with Brian Mast, a U.S. congressman. How many U.S. congressmen and rabbis who are praying for this whole thing, I'm sure, did this terrorist talk to in their briefings? Then you have the actual JewishInsider.com article discussing this thing. You can read it for yourself.
Hold on a second. Years ago, I contacted the former FBI agent, special agent Ted Gunderson, and he sent me a whole bunch of materials and things early on when I was researching, and he talked about in one of those that he actually had the chance to meet a man named Timothy Osmond, alias for Osama bin Laden was his real name, and he met him at the White House. And I thought, man, I'd love to see proof of that. You know, I mean, he was there, he saw him, he met him, because Osama bin Laden was a CIA asset, very much involved with Halliburton, Dick Cheney's investment, defense contracting and investment company. And you know, you think, wow, boy, to get proof of that. Well, here's another one, right there that they're doing it right in front of your face.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Islamic terrorism, all the stuff, 9/11, and don't ever forget 9/11. What are you doing right here? They're doing it again because it's all about money.
Mm-hmm.
Continue.
And it's interesting because this terrorist, al-Sharah, is transitioning Syria's economy from a national, or what I would call a indigenous localized economy, to a market-based economy for the profitable enterprising efforts of multinational corporations. And they talk about freeing the people of Syria of war, ISIS, and extremism. Well, these are all characteristics of MSOS devilment. The MSOS always declare war and continue war against unmingled people. ISIS is a MSOS creation, and extremism is an MSOS behavior. Yeah. So you can see how they talk about their true purpose. Here you have a Facebook photo of this terrorist, al-Sharah. Trump hosts this de facto president, CIA selected candidate to do this transition in Syria in a historic visit as U.S. eyes this Israel-Syria situation. And here they discuss a little summation of it, but here is their actual news article in their own words. Look at the AJC logo banner behind her, this representative from Iowa, talking about being optimistic for this future of Syria. Yes, because she's chomping at the bit for this market economy to fully be implemented in Syria, thereby destroying the traditional indigenous culture of the true Syrians who are unmingled. And they talk about how al-Sharah is a member of Al-Qaeda, meaning CIA entity. He's a terrorist, and she's dialoguing with this terrorist devil? That's rather strange. It's called American Jewish Committee. That's why it says AJC, Center for a New Middle East, meaning a marketized Middle East. Here you have Christians United for Israel, talking about the new U.S. Embassy building in Jerusalem unveiled. See the infamous U.S. government type of
Masonic eagle.
Mm-hmm.
But keep going.
And they talk about the infrastructure, how it's being built, and what it truly symbolizes. And how President Trump actually authorized this whole thing to occur, moving this embassy to Jerusalem. And finally, you have the White House's own website showing President Trump's Education and Sharing Day USA 2025 presidential action. This is a Noahide law implementation type of event. And here, in their own words, just to highlight a few things, they talk about this is done in memory of the Rebbe, or Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, or Rabbi, and leader of the Chabad Lubavitch community, whose Hebrew birthday corresponds to this day. Nice. And how he embarked on a global campaign of spiritual outreach to bring the light of faith, or rather Noahide devilment, and Yiddishkeit to countless members of the Jewish community. Their Jewish community includes Noahides, Genos, Jews in name only, and of course the Synagogue of Satan. So anybody who embraces this whole satanic system is part of the Jewish community. And the Jesuit order is also a synagogue of Jews. So you can see how their community reach is very extensive. And they even talk about the exact location of this satanic organization being located at 770 Eastern Parkway in Crown Heights of the Brooklyn borough of New York City. Satan's favorite commune, in my opinion, for this whole satanic MSOS system. It's the Chabad headquarters, in order to reinvigorate the Chabad Lubavitch movement and a religious revival. And they
and
talk.
This is all Trump writing this stuff here too. So, but we have to finish up here. But you can read this whole thing here in your own time. And you know, you have to understand the rebellion works like this. Number one, it's the fifth kingdom. The Jews and the Catholics working together, the Roman Catholic Church with their conquering all the different nations and things, building the New World Order, the Jews doing it with the finance system to make the whole thing happen. The Second Vatican Council, Nostra Aetate, all this stuff, the Catholics and Jews working together. So you have that. You have rabbis, when Jesus Christ said there are no more rabbis. Okay? They're not even following Old Testament Judaism. Again, please understand, it's not that, oh, well, we can't speak against them because they're the Jews of the Old Testament. They just haven't received the New Testament. They don't even believe in the Old Testament. Okay, they're not doing it anything. It's scriptural. All right. The other thing is the conquering of ethnic boundaries, the bounds of their habitation, spoken of in Acts chapter 17. They're destroying all those boundaries. They're waging warfare against any nation that's saying, we want to be a sovereign nation and not under your control. They're building their kingdom without the King Jesus Christ. That's what this whole thing is about. And as a Christian, you cannot stand for this. And you have to understand that in order for you, your best way to rebel against it is to unplug from the debt system. Do not invest in the stock market. Get out of that whole thing. Don't go buy their mass-produced garbage through Walmart and just buying junk to make yourself happy. Stay away from that stuff. And there's other things that you can do as well. All right. Can't get into a huge amount of it here, but that's the main takeaway from this thing. And these church buildings, they're in debt, so that of course they're not going to speak against their masters that they are indebted to. Mm-hmm. That's why there's this radical pro-quote Israel thing, and it's such a challenging thing to get into with this whole thing, because you want to stand against Israel when you see all this stuff, but yet you realize there are Jews out there, they're real Jews, ethnic Jews, and that God has plans for the nation of Israel. But part of his plan is for these people to go back there so that he can pour out his judgment. That's the book of Revelation, right? And he's going to wipe out a lot of these people in that time. And that's why they hate the New Testament. Okay? So, is there anything you need to say in closing?
Yes, real quick. He's calling upon all government officials, educators, volunteers, and all the people of the United States to observe this Noahide Day with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. If there's a way you can rebel against this whole Noahide holiday or day, please do so, because the Noahide system is very satanic. Mm-hmm. And as we've mentioned earlier in this study, don't they kill people for believing in Jesus Christ?
I did a video about it. I'll link it here at the end, where if you believe in Jesus Christ, if you believe that Jesus is God, they'll cut your head off. That's what they want to bring in. And Donald Trump is completely in bed with these people. The whole Epstein thing that's coming out, I hope that they get rid of Trump. I really do. I hope that the guy is kicked out. I mean, we get a pedophile for president? Well, that's good. Well, hey, if you're into the Talmudic type of thing, well, pedophilia is fine in there. It's very highly satanic, and we as Christians have to stand against it. Don't you dare say God bless this great man, Donald Trump. Don't you fall for his witchcraft, for this satanic stuff that they're doing. So that is going to be it. And you can read the articles. It backs up everything my wife was saying in this thing here. And well, I'll tell you what, it's getting real serious. But that's the reason for the time of Jacob's trouble, which the church is not appointed to. So that is going to be it. Watch the videos here at the end, and thank you very much for watching.